And welcome everyone to Beyond the Forecast. I am Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens, and we are bringing you again from the deck here at our Traverse City studios. But today we are going to take you back into a few things that we've had in our previous episodes, as we are now in episode 48. So let's look back at some of the earlier episodes that you may have missed. So today we're going to take you into wildfires. Meteorologist John Gross is going to tell you how they develop and what you should know about prevention. And then I'm going to take you into a fun experiment of vinegar and baking soda and why it can extinguish flames and how that works. And then at the end of the show, we take you into another fun experiment with more baking soda and vinegar, but also adding balloons. Baking soda and vinegar, just fun to use. So we're going to show you that at the end of the show before we say goodbye. All right, trivia time. Before we get into our show, yesterday we asked true or false, if your shadow is shorter than you, then the UV index is low. That's false. UV index can be high regardless if there's quite a bit of sunshine or shadows. So that is false. Today's trivia question, we want to know, true or false, tornadoes don't cross rivers. QR code. We'll have that set up so you can hit that with your QR code and put your answer in. And we'll have the answer for you tomorrow on Beyond the Forecast. Viewer photo of the day brought to you, as always, by Great Rooms. Today's picture comes to us from Casey Roaring. A beautiful snap of robin eggs in a nest there. If that doesn't scream springtime in northern Michigan, I don't know what does. But look at those beautiful eggs. Thank you, Casey, for sending that picture in. And as always, thank you to Great Rooms for sponsoring Viewer Photo of the Day. All right, let's get to our show. Let's send it over to meteorologist John Gross, who's going to talk to you about wildfires. What are the 3 things that are needed to make wildfires, but also what you can do to prevent them. We'll have that coming up right after the break.
Hey there, everybody. Meteorologist John Gross, and today we are going to be talking about wildfires and the ingredients that you do need for a wildfire not only to start, but we'll also talk about weather conditions that can unfortunately help wildfires spread and become very, very dangerous. So let's go ahead and go over a few things that you do need for a wildfire to initiate. And one of the main things that you do need is that spark. Now, you can talk about a lightning strike, you can talk about a campfire or a bonfire, you can even talk about sparks coming off of power tools, a hot car on dry vegetation, but you need that spark to initiate the fire itself. And once you have that, if you have a source of fuel, otherwise known as dry vegetation, maybe trees, things of that nature, and you combine that with, well, any oxygen that we have, and we know we have that here on planet Earth, that's how you can really start to get these wildfires, unfortunately, spreading very, very quickly. So main causes for a wildfire, again, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it can be a natural cause where you can talk about lightning, where you can have what's called a dry thunderstorm, pretty much meaning you have a thunderstorm that produces lightning, but not any rainfall. And that actually can help to cause a wildfire to start. Or we can talk about things like a campfire or a bonfire. If things are very, very dry, those unfortunately can get out of control very, very quickly if the conditions are right. Heat from the sun, that can make things very dry, otherwise known as a drought, and just the severity of that drought. When you're talking about a lot of dry vegetation, that can be a fuel source for fires. Also just human error. You can talk about just things that we as humans do sometimes that may or may not be intentional, but that also can be the cause of how a wildfire does start. Now, factors for how they continue to grow. So now we have that spark. What are some of the main things we talk about? And this is where the weather perspective does come into play a little bit more. You could be talking about overgrown forests. What we mean by that is the trees themselves, they might not just be, well, very much alive. The trees themselves could be dying, at least the timber or whatever it might be. That wood could be very, very dry, and that can just be a very good fuel source for a wildfire to continue to grow. You can also talk about any dry vegetation from that tree that could fall, maybe pine needles, just sticks on the forest floor. That could also be a source for wildfire growth. You're also talking about drought, like we did mention. If you have not seen a lot of rainfall and the ground is very, very dry, that can also be a source for wildfire growth. Extreme heat, when you're talking about heat waves. Usually when you're talking about a heat wave, that's temperatures very, very hot for at least a few days. Usually you're not talking about a lot of rainfall, so still very, very dry conditions. And the wind. If you're talking about those very hot embers and it's very, very windy, that can help to just spread a wildfire very, very quickly, depending exactly on where you're located, whether that be in an area that has a lot of trees, or even sometimes we've seen wildfires growing, unfortunately, in urban locations. So that can be something, again, that can spread wildfires very, very quickly. Now, things you can do to prevent wildfires from not only starting, but even spreading, making sure if you're ever having a bonfire or a campfire, you're never leaving it unattended. Also checking in with burn bans and just seeing how the fire danger looks for a specific area. Probably not going to be the best idea to have that bonfire or campfire. Watching grilling as well. That can also be a fuel source, or at least a heat source. If the vegetation under the grill is very, very hot, that could also be the start of a wildfire, so watching for that. Again, burn bans and those warnings, red flag warnings, they're in play for a reason when you're talking about very, very dry conditions, so adhering to those. If you do happen to be a smoker and you are discarding of cigarettes, maybe that's something that you're just not actively thinking about. That also could be the spark for a wildfire. When you're talking about vegetation, keeping vehicles off of that dry vegetation, the heat from a vehicle itself, that also can be the spark for a wildfire to start. Avoiding power tools that cause sparks literally could be the spark to start a wildfire. And then again, obeying any orders from potentially the DNR. Again, those are in play for a reason, because wildfires, if that spark is initiated, it can spread very, very quickly. Let's go ahead and talk about the winds a little bit more. Now, certain parts of the country can be susceptible to wildfires spreading a little bit quicker than others. And one thing that we do focus on, especially here into California, is what we do call the Santa Ana winds. Now, this can happen over any mountain range that you do see, but areas into California, near Los Angeles, time and time again, we've talked about how strong the Santa Ana winds can be. And if you have that wind flow coming over the mountain range, and then that air, as it sinks to the surface, it begins to warm. You couple that with a very dry landmass. Now, sometimes you're talking about the wet season here into California, but you can also talk about very dry conditions as well. So when you couple those two with those gusty winds, that can be a recipe for fire danger, and then again, fire growth. That can be very, very explosive. And unfortunately, we did see very, very destructive wildfires just to the north of Los Angeles, areas near Pasadena. If you do remember that, it was a very, very destructive wildfire that destroyed thousands of homes and really uprooted many people's lives. So this is what we're talking about when you have that chance, not only for wildfires to spark, but again, they can spread very, very easily. So talking a little bit more about those Santa Ana winds, as those winds are coming over the peak of the mountain. Now remember, temperatures as you're going up in height within the atmosphere itself, they are cooler, but the downslope effect of those winds eventually going to areas like we did see near Pasadena, California, when you're coupling that with those warmer temperatures, very, very dry conditions, low humidity values, and those gusty winds, that can be a recipe for fires to not only develop, but spread very, very quickly. So making sure you do know the signs and things that you can just do to prevent wildfires from spreading can be very, very important. I'm meteorologist John Gross reporting for Beyond the Forecast.
Thanks, John. Coming up next, I'm going to show you a fun experiment involving baking soda and vinegar, but also how it can extinguish flames. We'll have that coming up right after the break. And welcome back, everyone, to Beyond the Forecast. Now, today we are going to be doing a little fun experiment to show you the fire triangle. Now, the fire triangle is quite simply the three ingredients that make fire burn. You need oxygen, you need heat, and you need fuel. Now, if you were to take one of those things away, fire won't work. So when you have that triangle, think of like a fire extinguisher. A fire extinguisher is trying to get rid of one of those pillars to extinguish the fire. And fire extinguishers, there's about several different types. There's powder, there's water, there's CO2, and all of those things will do certain things to a fire to get rid of one of those pillars. Well, today we're going to run you through a fun little experiment, which does include fire. So kids, if you want to do this, make sure your parents are involved in running the experiment. But we're going to show you an experiment that basically shows you taking away one of those pillars to erase fire. So what you'll need is a candle preferably one of these little candles like this that you can sit on top. You'll need a glass bowl or a glass, which the candle can go in. And then you'll also need some baking soda. You'll also need some vinegar. And you'll also need something to sit the candle on. So I have a little bit of clay here that will sit in the glass and the candle can sit on it. So this will go inside the glass, like so. And then you will put baking soda around the clay piece or the centerpiece that you have the candle sitting on. Now, what you really want to do is have enough baking soda in there that will take up probably about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom to the top. You don't want it over the centerpiece. You don't want the baking soda too high. You want it right around about 1/4 of an inch. Now, you also want a glass dish that is going to be above the flame. And we'll explain why here shortly. So there you go. All right. So let's spread that around. I might have too much, but we'll figure it out. All right. So we got a little bit of baking soda in there, and you can see it's surrounding our little clay piece. Not above it, but around it. And when we put that down, we'll show you that on the close-up. What you're going to need now is the candle. And you want to set fire to your candle. So it is burning. And you want to make sure you can set it safely inside the glass so you can see it burning. Now, remember we were talking about fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers are looking to take away that one pillar, or maybe two pillars, so fire will come to an end. So you have oxygen, you have heat, and you have fuel. Those three things combined create fire. Think of it like chemistry. Those things combine to create an element, and that element is fire. But an extinguisher, if you take one of those pillars away, fire goes out. So what we're doing here is we have baking soda surrounding our candle. Now, you want to take some vinegar, and you might want to take a glass if you have a big jug like me, so you can start pouring it around the edges. And you'll see what happens. We'll have it on close-up right here, and then we'll also show you from there. But what's pretty crazy is we're going to take away one of those pillars with just some vinegar and baking soda, not touching the candle. We'll show you. All right, so we'll pour some vinegar in this glass. Everybody always loves it at work when I use vinegar. So if you've ever used vinegar and baking soda before, you know there is a chemical reaction. That's how you make a volcano. It starts to erupt. So what's going to happen when I put in this vinegar into the baking soda? Well, let's find out, shall we? Do you see that? The flame was extinguished. Now, why is that? What does baking soda and vinegar give off? CO2. So it's robbing the candle of oxygen, one of the main pillars of the fire triangle. So what you did was you created a chemical reaction with vinegar and baking soda, creating CO2, which started to rise in the glass. And as the CO2 got above the flame ran out of oxygen and went out. So there you go. Now, you want to try to prove me wrong? Just take some, or you can also do this too. Show you just the difference. You see that? There's still some CO2, and the flame can't keep going. See that? So there's still some CO2 in the glass. Now, what you can do is do it again, put more baking soda in there, and then light another candle and put water in there. What do you think will happen then? Is it going to extinguish the flame or is it not? Well, it's not going to extinguish the flame because water and baking soda do not have a chemical reaction. It is not giving anything off. So vinegar and baking soda gives off that CO2. If you were to try to use a different substance, you'd have to pour it right on, especially water. You'd have to pour it right on the flame, extinguishing another pillar to the fire triangle. So there you go. Pretty cool little experiment that you can do, creating your own little fire extinguisher. So that's what fire extinguishers do. They take away that pillar trying to put out the fire. So today we created CO2, which took away the oxygen for fire to continue to burn. Pretty cool. A little fun experiment for you. Again, kids, if you want to try this at home, you can, but make sure your parents are involved. Make sure they are there with the fire, the baking soda, and the vinegar, because sometimes baking soda and vinegar can get a little out of hand. But it is really cool to see the science working. So there you go. I'm Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens for Beyond the Forecast. We'll have much more right after the break. And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Beyond the Forecast, our little STEAM STEM projects that we do here. This one involves balloons, baking soda, and vinegar. Now, some of the experiments that we've had here the last few times have involved baking soda and vinegar, and we showed it how it creates CO2 and can become a fire suppressant and takes away the oxygen so fire cannot survive. And you can use it to create volcanoes where you put in a little red food coloring, vinegar, and baking soda, and it looks like lava overflowing in a volcano. But today we're going to show you a really cool thing that you can do with vinegar in a water bottle or pop bottle, some baking soda, which you put inside a balloon, and then just a normal balloon. And so this is kind of special for the end. This is a light colored balloon because this one's going to be lighter, and we'll explain why at the end. Baking soda into the vinegar, the gas rises, nowhere for the gas to go except in the balloon. It should blow up our balloon. Let's see if this works, shall we? Lift up the balloon. Oh gosh. Whew. That was a very powerful one. The last time I did this, it wasn't nearly as powerful. But there you go. All that gas rose up into the balloon and blew up our balloon for us. Now, take the other balloon and blow it up yourself. In this balloon, this is full of oxygen, but also a little bit of CO2. This comes from our lungs. So our lungs expire different than vinegar and baking soda. Vinegar and baking soda is just straight CO2. There's nothing but CO2 gas inside this balloon. In this one, our lungs create different percentages. So there's a little bit of oxygen, there's a little bit of CO2, and it's lighter. So full CO2 is heavier, whereas this is a little bit more buoyant. So more dense gas, less dense gas. We drop this at the same time. The blue one should hit the ground first. See that? CO2 is more dense than what we expire. Even though there is a little bit of CO2 in what we expire, this full CO2, far less CO2, blue falls faster. So there you go. Gases, not all equal by any means. So CO2 heavy, oxygen, a little bit of CO2, a little bit of everything else from your lungs, much lighter. CO2, much heavier, generated by vinegar and baking soda. So if you want to blow up a balloon, you don't have to do it yourself. Let vinegar and baking soda do it. But it is going to be a little bit heavier. And you can actually feel the difference too. There is a little bit more weight to the blue balloon. So there you go. Fun little experiment to try and do at home. Make sure that parents are helping you out, kids, if you want to try this out. But again, just a bottle of vinegar, fill up a little bit of baking soda in a balloon, make sure it's on top of the water bottle securely, let it go, and you'll see the balloon start to inflate with the gas that vinegar and baking soda set off. So there you go, a little fun, a little science, a little weather. And there you go, fun little experiment for you to try out with the kiddos. And again, kids, if you want to do it, make sure the parents aren't involved. But that does it for our show today. Thank you to meteorologist John Gross, meteorologist Haley Fischetti, I'm Chief Meteorologist Michael Stevens, and thank you for spending your afternoon with us, and we'll be right back here tomorrow, 4:30 to 5 o'clock. So until then, be good, stay safe, take care. We'll see you tomorrow.